All right, let's jump right into a really fascinating book, Bertrand Russell's 1912 classic, The Problems of Philosophy. Now, you might think philosophy is all about abstract, complicated stuff, right? Well, Russell starts with the most ordinary things you can imagine. And by the end, he's got you questioning everything you thought you knew about reality itself. It's a wild ride.
So here's the plan. We're going to start with, believe it or not, the problem with your table. That's going to lead us straight into this huge idea of appearance versus reality. Then we'll dip into the age-old debate about minds and matter, unpack Russell's two different ways of knowing something, and wrap it all up with the one big leap of faith that all of science, and really all of us, have to make every single day.
Okay, first up, the problem with your table. And the subtitle here is key. Why philosophy begins with the most ordinary things. See, Russell doesn't throw us in the deep end with some crazy abstract idea. Nope. He starts with something super simple, something you might even be using this very moment.
And this is the question he hits us with right at the start. Is there any knowledge in the world so certain that no reasonable person could doubt it? I mean, it sounds simple, right? Of course there is. But, as we're about to find out, trying to pin down even one thing that's absolutely 100% certain, well, that's where philosophy really begins.
So, to get us thinking, Russell says, okay, let's just look at this table. You know, a plain old table. It seems so obvious. It's solid. It's real. You feel like you know exactly what it is. But do you? Do you really?
And this is where things get tricky. On the one hand, you have what you see, the appearance. The color kind of changes depending on where the light hits it, doesn't it? And if you move around, the shape goes from looking like a rectangle to more of a trapezoid. And when you touch it, it feels smooth. But then there's what you think the table really is. You believe it's one uniform brown color all over. You're sure it's a perfect rectangle. And if you had a microscope, you'd know it's not smooth at all. It's got this whole textured grain with little hills and valleys. So, which one is the actual table? The changing thing our senses pick up, or the permanent thing in our minds?
Okay, so that whole table problem leads us right into our next big topic, appearance versus reality. To help us get a handle on this, Russell gives us a couple of key definitions that are really important. The first term is sense data. Think of this as all the raw bits of information that your senses are feeding you. It's the specific shade of brown you're seeing right now, the feeling of smoothness, the sound it makes when you knock on it. But here's the kicker. Russell says this stuff, the sense data, is not the table. It's just the signal, the evidence that a table is there. And that brings us to the second term, the physical object. Now, this is what we mean when we say the real table. It's the actual thing out there in the world that we believe is causing all that sense data. But notice that little phrase on the slide, if it exists. That's a big if, because according to this idea, we never ever experience the physical object directly. We only guess or infer that it's there based on all the sense data we're getting.
So let's walk through how this all happens. First, we assume there's a real table, the physical object just existing out there. Step 2, that table causes things to happen, like light waves bouncing off it. Those light waves then hit your eyes, which creates, you guessed it, sense data. The colors, the shape, that feeling of hardness. And finally, your brain becomes aware of that sense data. And that awareness is what we call sensation. You see how many steps there are? There's this huge gap between the actual object and what you finally experience in your mind.
This whole puzzle about what's really out there brings us to a massive, long-running debate in philosophy. So, Section 3, Minds, Matter, and History. What Russell's talking about here isn't some brand new problem. He's actually wading into this ancient argument about what the universe is fundamentally made of.
So you've got two main camps here. On one side, you have materialism. This is basically the common sense view, right? It says the world is made of physical stuff, matter, and that stuff exists all on its own, whether we're looking at it or not. Our senses are just picking up signals from this physical world. But then you have idealism. This is a bit more of a philosopher's view. It argues that no, the world is fundamentally made of minds and their ideas. For an idealist, nothing can exist unless a mind perceives it. That real table, it's actually just an idea. And this idea is perfectly summed up by Bishop George Berkeley's famous line, "To be is to be perceived." It's that classic thought experiment. If a tree falls in a forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, an idealist like Berkeley would say no, because sound is a perception, an idea in a mind. So you might be asking, well, does my table disappear when I leave the room? Berkeley's answer was that it keeps existing because it's a constant idea in the mind of God.
Okay, so wait a minute. If we can't even be sure what reality is made of, matter or mind, and we don't even experience it directly, then how in the world can we know anything at all? It's a pretty big problem, right? Well, this brings us to section 4, where Russell offers us a way out, his 2 ways of knowing.
So Russell says, look, knowledge comes in 2 flavors. First, there's knowledge by acquaintance. This is the stuff you know directly, firsthand. You don't need to reason it out, you're just aware of it. Like the color red you're seeing right now, or the memory of what you had for breakfast, or the feeling of being tired. You're acquainted with it. Then there's knowledge by description. This is knowing about something, indirectly, through facts. For example, you probably know that Bismarck was the first chancellor of the German Empire, even though you've never met him. You know him through a description. And here's the brilliant connection back to our table. We have knowledge by acquaintance with its sense data, the color, the texture, but we only have knowledge by description of the real table itself.
And this, for Russell, is the absolute foundation of everything we know. Think of all human knowledge, science, history, everything, as this massive, incredible building. Well, knowledge by description makes up the walls and the roof and all the complex parts. But the foundation, the very bedrock that the entire thing rests on, is knowledge by acquaintance. It all has to be built on those simple, direct experiences, our sense data, our memories, our feelings, and even general ideas like whiteness or justice.
And that brings us to our final section. And honestly, this one might be the most unsettling of all. Science's leap of faith. Because now, Russell is going to take aim at the one fundamental belief that underpins not just all of science, but our ability to even function in the world.
Let's take something we all know for sure. The sun has risen every single day of your life. Every morning, like clockwork, there it is. It's probably the most reliable thing we can think of.
But here's the question. Does that prove it will rise again tomorrow? I mean, really prove it with absolute certainty? And Russell's answer is a hard no. Just because something has happened 1 billion times in the past doesn't logically guarantee it has to happen the next time. The past, he says, is not proof of the future.
So, why do we all believe the sun will rise? It's because of something called the principle of induction. And all that really means is we have this deep, gut-level belief that the future is probably going to be like the past. We just assume that the rules of the universe that worked yesterday will still be working tomorrow. But here's the real mind bender. Experience can't prove this principle. Why not? Well, think about it. How would you prove that the past is a good guide to the future? You'd say, well, in the past has always been a good guide to the future. See the problem? You're using the principle to prove the principle. It's totally circular. This belief in induction, which is the foundation of science and everyday life, is something we just have to take on faith. We can't prove it.
So let's wrap this all up. What are the big takeaways from Russell? First, you got to question your senses. The difference between how things appear and what they might really be is huge. Second, remember that all of our knowledge, the whole shebang, is built on a foundation of things we experience directly. Third, a lot of what we think we know for sure is really just a good guess, an inference. And finally, our entire belief in a predictable future, the very thing that science relies on, is based on a principle that we can never, ever prove.
So I'll leave you with this final question to think about. What other instinctive beliefs do we rely on every single day without any proof? Think about it. The belief that other people have thoughts and feelings just like you do. The belief that the world doesn't just vanish when you close your eyes. Russell shows us that just beneath the surface of our most basic, common-sense ideas, there's a whole world of mystery and wonder.
This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.